and welcome to today's podcast. Today we welcome a guest to discuss the extreme anger currently in public discourse and how this may be damaging public discourse and intelligent discussion altogether. As well as this, we're going to be looking at some of the sociological and psychological reasons for why this anger may exist. Welcome, James.
Hello.
Why do you think there's so much anger in public discourse at the moment?
Well, I think it's a lot to do with the psychological reasons behind why people think things in the first place. People never want to admit they're wrong. It takes a lot of courage and bravery, even myself, to actually admit that you're wrong about something. But people are wrong about things all the time. This psychological thing the brain has where it refuses to be wrong. And it always wants to make itself look good, basically.
Yes, yeah, I've read a study about this somewhere. I think there was one startling fact that was something like, even if you hear things that completely destroy what you initially thought, sometimes what you initially thought is reaffirmed and you're even more convinced that it's true, even though you've heard something that's completely contrasting to what you've said. What do you think about that? Do you think that happens as well?
Oh yeah, definitely. The brain has this way of sort of turning information around. Like, I think a really good example is anti-vaxxers.
Yeah.
It's impossible, well, not impossible, incredibly difficult to convince them to not be an anti-vaxxer because they won't listen to facts. The brain, what it has, it gets ideas sort of locked in its head, and once these ideas are locked, it's far easier for the brain to just keep these ideas rather than changing them.
Yes.
So the brain will do anything it can to keep this idea in its head. So it will even take information against this idea that fundamentally undermines it and turn it around just so it further reinforces this idea.
Yeah. Do you think as well that this kind of, when people see kind of contrast to their own beliefs, it kind of generates an anger because people think that they must be right. Generally, I think this is what's most unfortunate about the modern way of thinking. People presume they're right.
Of course.
A lot of the time, which is completely opposite to what like Socrates and all the great thinkers about the study of knowledge said. So you should always presume you're wrong, but people often presume they're right. So when people presume they're right, they therefore think that they are right. So when they hear someone that disagrees with them, they presume that they are wrong. And this kind of angers people, I think, the kind of idea that people are out there who disagree with them thinking they're right when it's like, no, I'm right. Do you think that angers people? Yeah,
people do get incredibly angry when having political discussions, especially I've noticed if they're losing. If their argument's completely destroyed, they'll just resort to sort of anger, insults, and eventually just stop talking to you and claim victory.
Yeah. I mean, I think people are more likely to get angry. People are more likely to get angry and claim victory, claim a false victory.
Yeah.
Rather than say, okay, what they're saying makes sense, makes more sense than what I'm saying, therefore I'm less likely to be right than them. People don't do that anymore.
People don't do that.
It certainly feels like that. It's why I think over the past 5 years, I read a statistic somewhere, the past 5 years has seen the least number of politicians who have switched parties. It used to be, I think, a prime example is in around the 60s, 70s in America, a massive switch in Democrat Republicans because it was like a massive political upheaval. People were moving about, people were changing their beliefs. That doesn't happen anymore. When you're a Republican, I think the amount of Republicans that changed to Democrat or the other way around was nearly zero. So a lot less people are changing their beliefs. And do you think that's linked into this idea that people presume they're always right?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's definitely contributed to the fact that a lot of people these days believe things that, well, to us seem obviously wrong. Like, you heard about the whole flat earth movement.
Yeah.
This is a real thing. People genuinely believe the world is flat.
And they're based off such flimsy arguments as well. I think one of them is like, well, the horizon is flat. Yeah. Therefore, the Earth is flat.
And anything you say won't work because they'll just say it's part of the conspiracy. So people who believe things like this, and it's the same for anti-vaxxers, you'll never convince them of it. And it's all because of this psychological desire the brain has to be right.
Yeah. And kind of, as well, there's sort of like the dominant psychology about it as well. Because humans are designed, and it's an instinct, humans are designed to be dominant over other humans. This is what the hormone serotonin does. It kind of perceives a sense of dominance. Confidence kind of originates from a form of will to dominate because the confidence is the ability to kind of be yourself without regarding other humans, and kind of there's that sense of dominance in that sort of aspect because you're not really considering what other people think in that kind of idea. So this idea of dominance as well, people perceive themselves, people like to be generally more intellectually kind of adept than other people.
Yeah.
And this kind of will to kind of be right kind of stems from that. So how do you think this will to be right and this kind of anger as a response to it is damaging to kind of public discussion?
Well, it certainly makes it harder. It's almost like today, even mentioning politics has become a sort of taboo.
Yeah.
You can't... There's a sort of joke about bringing up politics at the dinner table.
Yeah.
Everyone hates you. I don't see that it should be this way. I think people should be able to discuss these things in a civil manner, but it's all because of this modern view to always be right and dominance, that people don't even want to discuss this because they know it makes people so angry.
Yeah.
And I don't think it should. You should be able to still be friends with someone, still like someone.
Exactly.
Even if they have a different opinion with you.
Definitely. Well, Thomas Jefferson said, I don't know if I'll quote him right here, but it was something like, I see no reason in a political difference or ideological difference as a reason to withdraw from a friend. I know that was poor grammar, but so that probably isn't the quote. But it's something like that. He said, I see this as no reason to withdraw from a friend. It's like this idea that behind that quote, which is over 200 years old now, it's like you can have discussions with people about important issues and even disagree, but not see that as kind of a fundamental definition of their character.
Yeah,
I think that's an important thing to talk about as well. People these days see kind of political alliances as definition of their character.
Yeah, that's sort of who you are. If you think this thing, then you are completely opposed to me. You think all these other things that go with that, and I can't be friends with you anymore because we're opposed, basically.
Well, as people probably know, I'm always very vocal about my opinions, and I'm on the right wing. I think a lot of I don't know this for sure, but I think a lot of people, when they first see me, the first thing is they don't think about my character. They don't think about what my interests are, what I'm like as a person. They think, oh, that's that right wing guy. Sometimes it's become a way of identifying people and kind of identifying their character and summarising their character, which I think is very bad for public discourse, and two, for just the general social fabric.
Yeah.
Because if you define someone as a political ideology that you don't like, then you're not going to like that person because you see that person solely as a manifestation of all the ideologies that you despise, and therefore they are literally despisable matter because they're made up of the things that you don't like. And I think that's the worldview at the moment.
Yeah, it reminds me of a quote that one of our teachers said. I think you know better than me, Joe.
Oh yeah, I think he said it's not all. He wanted to say it's not all white and black. He said you can't. He basically said you can't demonize people. For their beliefs. It's just not good, because as soon as you start demonizing people for their beliefs, you go down a path that leads to totalitarianism and he said the ideologies that motivate terrorism as well. And it's like, whoa, really? I don't know if that's true. Well, if you think about it, let's break that down a little. What motivates totalitarianism? The idea that totalitarianism is the idea that kind of you should silence other beliefs. Totalitarian governments, good example is Mao's China, Soviet Union, Nazi Germany, things that have silenced opposing political beliefs. And that's because, and the justification to that in the form of propaganda was these beliefs are evil, like communism.
Exactly.
Communism demonizes capitalism. It's no secret. Capitalism is selfishness. Capitalism is evil.
Yeah.
Therefore, it is justified to prosecute capitalists because they are manifestations of evil. These are totalitarian beliefs, and I think we're kind of seeing that come up again because people are saying this person, he supports the Conservative Party, therefore he is evil. Therefore, it is justified to be completely and utterly awful to that person.
Yeah, to not even try to debate with them normally, because
just to insult.
Yeah, if you want to talk with someone, then that shows you have a level of respect for them.
Yeah, but they don't have respect, do they? Because this is linked to what we've been talking about. That respect constitutes kind of from your interpretation of the person. But if your interpretation of the person is literally just the ideology that you disagree with, then that respect isn't going to be present. And with that respect comes intelligent conversation, respectful, polite discussion. If that respect isn't there, that's not going to happen. So now I'm kind of linking onto that. I'd like to talk about the demonisation. Do you think people in politics are demonised?
Oh, definitely. Yeah, on both sides.
Yeah. Okay, so why do you think this happens?
Well, I suppose it's sort of to demean them and make them not take their ideas seriously.
Yeah.
I suppose.
Yeah. Is it part of... Do you think it's part of the anger as well?
Yeah, definitely.
What I think is people see the beliefs opposed to them and think, first of all, they're disagreeing with me. This is okay. So I'll enter somebody else's shoes. First of all, they're disagreeing with me. I don't like this. This makes me angry. Second of all, they're making good arguments, and this is challenging my beliefs even more. So I'm going to get even more angry.
Yeah.
And I think what they kind of do is almost exactly what you said. What makes them even more angry is the idea that they think, right, okay, they disagree with me. They must be evil. It must be evil. So that makes it all right in their mind to draw moral equivalence between them and the most extreme of their own beliefs. So let's take the left's demonisation of the right, which happens. It obviously happens.
Yeah.
Now, right-wing people are more just people right-wing. I'll use the example Stephen Crowder. He's recently been in a lot of trouble for saying words like queer and stuff like that about a Vox News reporter.
Yeah.
And nearly all the left biased media platform called him far right, and they called him kind of alt right, far right. But he's never expressed far right or alt right beliefs. If you watch his videos, it's Changed My Mind, his podcast. He never expresses like far right and alt right beliefs. I even believe that he said a couple of times that the alt right and the far right are garbage political movements.
Yeah.
So why does this happen, do you think? Why do these people who don't like him use these kind of words?
Well, there's an even more extreme example. Jordan Peterson is also sort of dumped in this far-right bucket, even though he's even less right-wing than Stephen Crowder.
He's one of the most... He's not even very right-wing. He's spoken up for a few things. He said Marxism is bad, the far left is bad, feminism, which demands equity, is bad. He said freedom of speech is good. That's all he said. That's pretty much all he said. He doesn't like communism.
Yeah.
He doesn't like equity, because equity is kind of similar to a form of communism, but because it sets out a quota for people to... It's kind of the idea of telling people what jobs they can do.
Yeah, I suppose
so it's a form of communism. So we'll branch equity and communism into the same sort of thing in Marxism. Yeah. So he doesn't like communism, which is the far left. He doesn't like Marxism, which again is the far left. He doesn't like equity, which is like left to far left. And he also likes freedom of speech, which is just basically libertarianism.
Yeah.
He could be a centrist libertarian. He could even be a mildly left-wing libertarian. But because he's spoken against these kind of taboo issues, he's on the left exclusively. And he's also said that he doesn't like the far right. But because he's spoken about Nazis. I don't like Nazis. I think he said that. That's one of my favourite quotes from him. Yes, he was asked at a university one time by a kind of a left-wing activist. He says, Professor Peterson, what do you have to say about the Nazi presence at your protest? He's like, yeah, I don't like Nazis. It's like, what a
pretty good quote.
What an excellent reply. But you'll get my point. That's my fabulous impression of him once again. But you get my point. He's like, he's not expressed specific right-wing ideologies at all, but because he said things that people disagree with, he's been thrown into that bucket. And this happens a lot, I think.
This brings us back to the quote from our teacher. He said that just because he voted Brexit, then that immediately puts him... People think that he's a racist, basically.
Yeah, I don't think I'll quote him exactly here, but he said, I voted Brexit, but that doesn't mean I'm some white nationalist or racist or I hate immigration. It means I just have genuine concerns about the role of our democracy in the European Parliament.
Yeah. It's like people who just think some of these things are immediately sort of put into all these categories. If you're even slightly right wing, you're a Nazi. You're evil. Yeah.
I mean, as I said before, I've made my opinions on certain things very vocal. One of them is abortion, which we're going to get into in a minute.
Good.
I've been called every name in the book. I've been called homophobic. I've been called misogynist. I've been called woman hater before. I've been called Nazi. I've been called rapist, which is probably my favourite one. It was like, how?
Yeah, it was
how
like-
is saying things the same as rape? How can you draw that equivalence? Yeah, this is the things. I've been called fascist before by people who have literally tried to shut down the school's discussion club and tried to and literally reported me to Instagram over the course of several months to try and get my account removed. They are the people calling me fascist.
And this goes back to what you were saying about Mao, how silencing freedom of speech. This is sort of happening again. It's sort of silencing the other side. It's similar.
And it's I hate to blab on about Jordan Peterson. I promise I do not have a man crush on him. But
That would be a sin.
he was asked a question in one of his interviews. It's like, how on earth can you compare these kind of radical left activists to Chairman Mao, who killed millions of people? So he's like, oh, definitely. And he's like, well, and he's like, how are they different? And she's like, well, these people haven't killed millions of people. And he says, well, the philosophy guiding their utterances is the same philosophy as Chairman Mao.
Yeah.
And the reason is because Chairman Mao and the way the kind of the far left communist regime worked was, as I said before, he said, right, guys, look, we're communist. This is good. Communism is moral. Communism is fabulous. Communism is the moral exemplar of ideologies. So that means capitalism is the opposite, because you either have good or evil, right? And communism is good and capitalism is evil.
Yeah, and I mean,
that's what they told everyone. So when they rounded up capitalists and killed them, and even when they rounded up people who weren't necessarily capitalists but protested the communist state, they were also shown as evil, because like, well, they must have evil ideologies in them, therefore we're doing good work by
to
killing
play
them.
devil's advocate, it was also the exact same thing in America at the time.
Well,
McCarthyism.
yeah, it's exactly the same. It's the exact same justification. It's the idea, look, this is evil. They're out to destroy our country, so it's fine to kill them because, killing evil is good.
Yeah.
Somehow. Yeah, but that's kind of I think that's kind of what's gone on. So we're not going to actually have an abortion argument here. We're not going to talk in itself about the issue, but we're going to actually discuss kind of the nature of the discourse around the subject. So, as you know, I think about 10 US states have passed restrictive abortion laws with 3 more set to do so, and then it's estimated that 12 more will if the Supreme Court overturn Roe versus Wade, which are very likely to, because I think the report said that if Trump wins in 2020, he's going to get more Republicans on the Supreme Court, meaning that they are going to be able to overturn Roe versus Wade, which is what makes abortion a constitutional right in America. So that's going on. And I think, because before all this restriction was happening, people were like, abortion, I mean, it's pretty evil to be pro-life, but this is what the pro-choice side is like. It's pretty evil to be pro-life, but we don't really care, because it's not as if your ideas are ever going to be passed into law. And then so it's 10 states, no abortion, thank you. And everybody got a massive shock, I think. And everybody was kind of, I think the pro-choice side was kind of woken up. So think, oh my God, this is happening. How do we cope with it? How do we cope with it? How do we cope with it? And of course, there was a portion that said, look, let's make rational arguments. Let's have rational discussions about this. This is why it shouldn't happen. And then there were also the side that got very angry by this, because literally you've got this kind of legislative institutionalization of the ideologies that they hate. And this makes them super angry. So this made everybody super angry. But there were two kinds of people. There are people who are willing to have intelligent discussions about this. Then there are people who are so angry that they just demonize it completely.
Yeah, well, that's the majority, I think.
The majority. So, why do you think abortion is such a particularly kind of taboo issue? Well,
it's a little weird, isn't it? It's so sort of, taboo, but I think it's all sort of entwined with women's rights, and I think abortion, the whole issue of abortion has become so ingrained in the idea of modern women's empowerment, is that if anyone sort of disagrees with it, then they must be against women's rights, because it's a women's issue. It's, well, that's what they say. It's women's rights, I think.
Yeah, and we've just finished our history course, and in the Power and the People, which is all about people's rights, in the feminist kind of part of it, the passing of Roe versus Wade and the legalization of abortion is included in that. So it's kind of, we've kind of been told that women have been told, and men have been told this as well, that abortion is fundamental to women's rights and empowerment. So therefore, kind of, they view, and the people on the pro-choice side view abortion as instrumental. When this kind of instrumental thing is slashed, people think it's an attack on women's rights.
Yeah.
And people think that the motivation is the attack on women's rights as well.
Yeah.
And this is what kind of brings about the anger around that. So how do you think the anger surrounding the abortion issue kind of impacts on the discussion about it?
Well, it's very difficult to have a discussion on it. It's very difficult to say that you're pro-life. I mean, look what's happened to you. I mean, you'll have plenty of stories of all the horrible cruelty that's
Well, yeah, I'd also
you.
like to point out as well, like, I think it's also, like, in abortion in particular, it's difficult for either side when you're surrounded in a social fabric that is the majority of the opposite.
Yeah.
So and everybody's largely, I think it's just a coincidence that the pro-life side received the most kind of the bad end of the stick, because pro-life side are generally the minority in most places, apart from obviously these states which have passed the legislation. But in most places in the West, the pro-life is always in the minority.
Yeah.
But if I even think if the pro-choice side was in the minority, they receive a similar amount of stick from the pro-life side. And I'll tell you why. It's because both of them see their own side as morally exemplar. So the pro-life side are like, look, babies are dismembered in the womb, we should not be doing this. And then the pro-choice side, it's fundamental to women's rights. Like, if you get rid of abortion, women will have terrible lives, hundreds will die from backstreet abortions, and that kind of stuff. So they both see it as, like, when an opposite opinion is expressed, it's a direct attack and direct demoralisation of the people that the movement values.
Yeah, and also it's just a very emotional argument. People get incredibly emotional about it, which makes it very difficult to have a discussion. Because
I think about 1 in 4 women have had or will have an abortion. So chances are people are going to know people who had abortion. So, like, if you go into the shoes of a pro-choice person, and then you see some crazy right-wing nut on Instagram ranting about abortion, and maybe your mum, maybe your auntie, I know, maybe even your older sister, if they've had an abortion and then you see this person saying abortion is evil, and then you're going to get angry.
It brings it to you, doesn't it? It makes it.
It's people. I think too many people see it as a personal attack.
Yeah,
too often as well.
Definitely.
Because especially women as well, because it again links into that kind of women's rights issue. It's like if you're a woman if you're kind of a pro-choice woman looking at I should make this distinction, because not all pro-choice women are like this, but if you are a pro-choice woman without an acknowledgement for the other side, then you're just going to get angry.
Yeah,
and that's the main problem with public discourse in general. I think it's like a lack of understanding generally leads to anger, because you can't understand why other people are saying what they're saying.
Definitely, and I think it's definitely a problem on both sides. I think the right wing also can get very emotional, very angry, but I think it is much more on the left wing that we'll see this.
That's interesting. I think it's both to an equal extent on both sides. But it's not tolerated as much on the right wing as it is on the left wing.
Very true.
Like, if a right wing person gets angry and starts saying, like, far right or right wing things, they are more likely to be kind of censored or told off or kind of shunned than a radical left wing person. Because I think people generally see, and maybe this is a generalisation, but people generally see as the left wing as the more kind of compassionate side, and I think this is because of history. If you look at history, it's largely been the left wing that have been leading the fight for the rights of people, and leading the rights of freedom and stuff like that. And it's the left wing that have been doing this over history, because the right wing over history were terrible. They were pretty terrible. There was a pretty terrible ideology, but I think a lot of people still see the left as the former left as kind of the champions of freedom. And then the right wing people still see the right wing as the side that opposes freedom and opposes the people. And this is what I think leads to the kind of the holding of the left in this moral exemplar.
Yeah, I agree.
What do you think this kind of moral balance does to people Say a left-wing person and a right-wing person were having a discussion. How do you think that discussion would be impacted by that? Say the left-wing person holds their own ideology as this kind of more acceptable.
Well, yeah, it's definitely sort of ingrained in the social consciousness that the left wing are good, they're right, they're moral. And I think that's definitely impacted on a lot of things, because most people don't really think about these things too much.
Yeah.
And, yeah, what you were saying, it would lead to the person on the left wing, well...
having a perceived level of importance, ideological importance, do you think?
Well, no, sort of just hating the other person because they believe they're wrong and that they believe this person is evil because they disagree with them. They believe, generally, of course, that the person of the left wing would, because their ideology, they believe it to be entirely moral. I mean, you could say that about the right wing as well. Yeah. But I think it's much more on the left wing. I think a lot of people aren't able to think about these things rationally, and they think that if you disagree with them, then you must be evil. You must be the devil. You must be unworthy of any kind of respect.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think this is largely down to because I think this obviously doesn't happen in all people on the left or all people on the right.
Yeah.
I think it only happens to the people on either side who don't properly understand the other side. Yeah. And this is kind of this is why understanding the other side of the argument is so important.
Yeah,
because if you're a pro-choice person that understands why pro-life people want to stop abortion, because it's like if you're pro-choice and you understand, right, look, it is a human life, that science proves that, and as dismembering it can feel pain from X amount of weeks. But I understand that, but I just think that it would be more beneficial societally and to the rights of women and empowerment of women if they had that choice to have an abortion. That is what a sensible pro-choice argument sounds like.
I don't get why pro-life people are so demonised, because they think it's alive, and so what's wrong with that? They think that you shouldn't kill things that are alive. Obviously, I can respect that. I don't get it why they're so hated.
Well, but I think there are two reasons that they're most hated. Is because one, the pro-choice side generally refuses to view them as alive. It's either that,
True.
Or if the pro-choice side... Actually, there's three reasons. They either don't view them as alive at all, they view them as alive but they dehumanise them. They make them somehow less valuable by using flimsy arguments like, well, it hasn't got a heartbeat from this... It's like, yeah, well, neither of people who need machines to function their hearts. It's like, well, brain function. It's like, yeah, well, what about people in comas? Sentience, yeah, what about when you're asleep? These flimsy arguments kind of are used to devalue the life of the human. It's either that, or the third one is simply that, well, yeah, I don't really care if it's alive or not. Point is, a woman's body. End of. And my third one, the third one is my least favourite. But the thing is, there's kind of those reasons that kind of motivate a lot of the pro-choice arguments kind of lead. It makes it hard. I think it makes it hard for the pro-life side to understand pro-choice side as well, which is why I think you've got this massive divide between pro-life and pro-choice, because they don't understand each other's arguments.
True. Yeah, very true.
Because I think the pro-life side sees the pro-choice side as a lot of times like literally you can never justify killing things, all right? And then the pro-choice side is like, well, you can't justify taking away women's empowerment. And maybe that's a bit of bias coming through me, because obviously the pro-choice argument is far weaker. But I think that's why you got a massive divide. And I think this doesn't only apply to abortion, but it applies to
most issues,
divisive things like Trump as well. What do you think about the anti-Trump protest going on when he visited when he visited the UK?
I don't agree with it. I think he's the leader. He's the president of the United States. Sure, he might not be a good president. Well, debatably, he might not be a nice man, but he's still the president of the United States, and it's a very common thing for world leaders to go see each other. I don't see why it's such a big deal. It's not
people didn't protest when the
Putin, Saudi King Abdullah II,
the premier of China, who's currently committing mass genocide against Muslims.
We've had
who doesn't allow freedom of speech. They didn't. Not a word from the left wing when Jiang Ping comes, the man who's committed genocide. He pops around, whatever. Trump, oh, what? He's building a wall
just
to
ridiculous.
reduce illegal immigration? Oh, we are going out on the streets and we are calling anybody who disagrees with us Nazis. And we're beating them up. We're beating them up.
It's completely ridiculous. We've had some of the worst despots ever have come and seen us on state visits. We've had Mugabe, we've had Saddam, we've had Gaddafi. I think we've had all the worst ones. Yeah. And nobody mentions them. People are complaining about Trump, a man who has said a few not very nice things on Twitter. Yeah. People are complaining about that. I mean, it's ridiculous.
I mean, he's obviously not a nice guy. I mean,
obviously.
I'm a kind of a fan overall of Trump's policies. I said this once, I'm sometimes Trump, right? When he does something good, I cheer because it's the good thing to do. And because I'm generally conservative, I cheer at most of the things he does. When he does something bad, like his cruelty on the border to some extent, I'd say no, we need to stop that. And he is stopping that, which is good. But when he I never cheer for his character because it's very hard to cheer for Donald Trump's character. Yeah. But I think people sometimes have to kind of see past that, and I think a lot of the reason, do you think part of the reason as well, is because they didn't protest against these awful people protest against Trump, is because Trump kind of is popular.
Yeah, it's. I think it sounds weird, but it's a lot to do with meme culture almost.
Yeah.
Like Trump is a meme. He's an internet legend, and everyone's on the internet these days. Yeah. And the people who are on the internet are the people who are likely to go out and protest against these things. I know it sounds ridiculous, but I think that's a lot to do with it.
Yeah, I do think people get angry when they see that he's popular.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Yeah, because I think people who disagree with him say, he's got 50% approval rating at the moment. That's higher than Obama. Well, why is that happening? He's doing all these things. He said all these things. And then they go out and they protest.
Yeah, I mean, if all these other awful people were memes, then people would probably care more.
Yeah. Well, I think if 50% of Britons approved of the Chinese rule or Putin, then people would probably people who weren't in that 50% would probably get
if Putin
very angry.
Said some stupid tweets on Twitter.
Yeah. I think part of it as well is kind of to do with culture to an extent, because I mean, it's no secret that the right wing have lost culture. We've lost the culture war. We've lost it to the left wing. In this country and in America as well. You've got the existence of political correctness in films, in TV, in media. You don't see any kind of pro-life films. You don't see any kind of very many pro-capitalists.
Well,
you see more kind of the more social liberal perspective in a lot of films.
It's because companies want to appeal to what they feel is
marginalised groups.
Is the majority.
Yeah.
And I think on the internet, definitely the left wing are far louder.
Yeah.
I think a lot of right wing people, horribly generalising, but they're old mostly, and old people don't use the internet. I know I'm massively generalising, but on the internet, the left wing reigns supreme, and the internet online is what we live most of our lives through. So companies see this and they just assume that most people are that. So of course they don't want to do anything that might oppose that. That's why we get so much left-wing media these days, because companies assume that that's what people like.
Because the left are louder than the right are a lot quieter. Because they have the fear of being marginalised, don't they?
Yeah, so I wouldn't say that there are more left-wing people than right-wing people. I think the left-wing is certainly much louder, though.
So people want to cater to these louder people, basically. But I think what Trump did, he kind of shook up the culture war a bit. Because, because suddenly, this is, the Ben Shapiro meme, the Trump memes. This is what they've kind of done. They've kind of brought these right-wing ideologies back into the culture, because you've just got.
Yeah, and that's why people are getting so offended. Yeah, we've had so long where it's only been we haven't had any major sort of right-wing figures, but now we've got these massive ones coming into the light.
That are so kind of they've divisive, but in their divisiveness, they gain popularity, because no publicity is bad publicity, right?
Yeah.
So you got Trump going on to literally the Republican primary debate with Ted Cruz and Jeb Bush, I think, and the question asked him, "You've called women you don't like dogs, whores," and he's like, "Only Rosie O'Donnell," and it's like the audience laughs, and it's like, what? This guy's going to be president?
Yeah,
and everybody's laughing.
He's a meme. He's a meme. That's how he won.
Yeah, he is. I think the reason he won is, one, because he's a meme.
Yeah.
Two, because people kind of over the Obama administration, they kind of see this kind of liberalization of America, and a lot of people didn't like it. And they also saw this kind of, the Obama administration was the increase in kind of the radical left that you see today. It's kind of the shouting down at gas stations, the you're a Nazi, you're a bigot, that kind of stuff. That is when it increased. It's during the Obama administration. And it kind of stemmed from the whole gay marriage debate, which, is a debatable issue, but that's where it stemmed from, the kind of liberalisation. And a lot of people saw this and it's like, well, liberalism, that's fine. But then liberalism turns into leftism, and people really don't like that. So when Trump kind of came on as this figurehead who promised to kind of make America great again, I think a lot of people, first of all, make America great again. It's like, what an arbitrary thing to say. It's like, when? When? It's like, well, America was great at times at certain things, but it was never definitively great.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe he's referring to the great ideals it was founded on in the Constitution. That's certainly possible. But by saying something that's such a cultural thing to say. It's like, it's brilliant because it can be subjectively interpreted. It's like, when was America great for you?
Yeah.
And whatever it was like back then, I'll make it like that. So that's I think that's why Trump won the election, because he won the culture war. So I think you've got this. I think we should try and round off what we're saying now.
Yeah.
So
well,
can you taking into what we've all said throughout the podcast?
I think people need to respect each other's opinions and think about things rationally. I think
both sides as well.
Yeah, both sides. I think someone who is the most brave and most intelligent is not someone who stands up for their beliefs, but someone who has the capacity to change their opinion. So if you've managed to change someone's mind on anything, basically, then you need to have a huge respect for them, because that takes a lot of courage to do. It involves getting past your brain's barriers and doing it. So that's what I think.
Excellent. Thanks for coming on. It's been an excellent show. Hopefully James will be reappearing in shows to come. And it may not always be friendly. We may not always be agreeing. We'll leave that for another time. Thank you everyone for listening, and we'll see you in the next podcast. Goodbye.